Well, no, it's
cut off, right?
we've been. I think everybody's been able to hear you so far. Yes.
Okay, well, in that case, it's time to rip off the mask and get to the task and talk about grass here as we jump into the rotation here on Sunday. I am your political director of Suncoast Normal, Gary Stein, along with my co-host, Carlos.
I'm Carlos Hermida.
Yeah, Carlos Hermida. Okay.
Yeah, I'm the deputy director of this little thing going on here.
I was just doing more a familiar type of thing, like homey kind of thing.
I am your homeboy.
It is, and of course, in the Beltway, we got Chris Cano talking to us from Southern Maryland, not too far from where almost all of the National Guard in the entire world are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Indeed. It is locked down here, tighter than
No, dude. So what's going? Is every capital going to get ambushed this weekend, or when Trump gets inaugurated? What's happening with all the conservatives and whatnot?
Well, the Federal Bureau of Investigation takes threats to national security very seriously, unless, of course, you count all those times in 2001 when they were warned that there would be terrorist attacks and they totally ignored them. So I guess they take white supremacy a little bit more seriously than they do, fundamentalism terrorists from the Middle East. Well, what can you say?
And we just jumped into all the conservative stuff, and we were talking about this heavy on our last show, and you guys realize that I brought this special guest on today, right? We were talking heavy last time about having an open discussion about all the different aisles and whatnot, and making sure everybody gets heard, and nobody blocks or bans or anything like that. And you guys are both familiar with Nate, who's a pretty heavy Trump supporter and cannabis activist here in the Tampa Bay area, and I'm going to bring him in right now. And we're going to talk to a Trump supporter about weed and about Trump. So here we go. What's up, Nate?
What's up, guys? How you doing? Glad to be on the show.
Welcome. So you do a bunch of stuff with cannabis activism, and you are a conservative, correct? I'm getting this right.
I'm a Christian conservative. I'm a pastor's kid. Grew up in the Christian home. Got saved when I was 4 years old. Was studying, deeper biblical things, end times theology, that kind of stuff when I was like 12. Went to Christian school. And then, I've got a back condition. I've got a grade 3 spondylolisthesis in my back. So most people's spines are like this. Mine's like shifted forward like this. So I'm like always in chronic pain. I've seen, surgeons that are too afraid to even cut me open. I've seen every physical therapist. I just got a platelet plasma injection in my spine, which actually helped. And just from my whole life experiences and the amount of chronic pain that I've been in, I've just come to the conclusion that, number one, cannabis definitely helps. I could be an opiate statistic. 25 people in Florida die every day just from opiate overdoses. If I wanted to go to a pain doctor and just be a pillhead, I could do that. Option 2 would just be to live in pain, and not deal with it at all. And option 3 is obviously cannabis and medical marijuana. So that definitely has helped me cope and live life and work. I don't get paid to be a cannabis advocate. I'm a freelance direct response sales copywriter for the real estate and e-commerce industry. So in order to function, I've got to use cannabis. And what I've just kind of found is that the church and the Christians and how they look at cannabis is very lopsided.
Well, so let me give everybody just kind of a rundown of how we came across Nate. So we Suncoast Normal, back when we were Central Florida Normal, we played a heavy part in the decriminalization of cannabis in the city of Tampa. And we, all three of us were there, me, Cano, and Gary, to speak to the city council. And we saw this guy, this white guy, sitting in the crowd, just sitting there by himself, with
Superman shirt on.
he had a Superman shirt on.
Yes.
he probably had a Superman shirt on.
I did.
And he had
And a
MAGA.
MAGA hoodie, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact.
On a MAGA hoodie. Yep.
So, and I remember sitting next to Kano, and we see this guy walk up and get in line to get into public comment, and Kano just kind of nudged me, and he's like, "Check out this dude with the MAGA shit on. He's gonna talk some garbage about cannabis, right?" And you go and you get up, and it's all pro legalization stuff, and it's all this good stuff about, you know, how, you know, decriminalizing cannabis in the city of Tampa is going to be great. So, you know, you're a guy that's full of surprises, and there's a couple of issues that we want to get into on the show. We titled the show, "What Would Jesus Do About Pot?" Right? Is that what I wrote it? Forgot. What would Jesus do about weed? Excuse me.
There you go.
And we also want to talk about Trump here, because there's a lot going on about Trump, and you're a huge Trump supporter. You swore up and down that Trump was going to legalize marijuana, and everybody thought you were, you know, batshit.
I thought my I guess what I was thinking at that time, if he did it his third year in office, it would be easier for him to reach across party lines and get some of the Bernie bros to vote for him. And this was all before coronavirus or any of that happened when I was thinking this. But, you know, I worked on 2 Republican political campaigns, helping him with their messaging so they could get the purple voter, and saw a lot of Republican advisors advising these Republicans. And the Republicans, like the Democrats, a lot of the establishment ones are in bed with the pharmaceutical companies and the prison industrial complex. So what they do is these advisors advise all their candidates that, oh, you can't be too far to the left on weed, on legalizing weed, because you're going to lose your conservative base. So, you know, I would imagine Trump probably had people in his cabinet telling him that, probably people like Jared Kushner, I would imagine, just kind of guessing. That's probably what happened. Also, you know, he's never been pro any kind of drug because of his history with what happened with his brother being an alcoholic, and he kind of relates that to cannabis. So it's definitely something that I disagree with Trump on. You know, I don't think anyone's going to agree with their candidate on everything. I wish he would have done that. I feel like if he would have done that, it probably would have been easier for him to win, honestly, but he didn't. And now we've got a president, Biden and Kamala Harris, both have been historically in bed with the prison industrial complex and the pharmaceutical company. So I'm not expecting that they're going to do anything either. But if they did, it'd probably be taxed to oblivion like it is in California. So I think we're going to need, like, you know, whoever comes after this.
Well, based on the situation we have right now, that obviously Biden and Harris are going to be the president and vice president, and we are going to have a Senate which is now shifted towards the center, and we have a House which has actually got a much slimmer lead than before. What do you think that we could do to move this thing forward with the configuration we have?
I don't think we can do anything, because I think that Republicans and the Senate are just full of a bunch of spoiled rich kids with mommy and daddy's connection to Harvard and Stanford and, you know, their establishment world. And I think that there are some good people that would support a federal bill in Congress and the Senate. But right now, I don't think that there's enough of them to do anything legislative. And we don't have a president that's going to sign any kind of executive orders for it. So I think we just keep working on trying to drain the swamp and get non-establishment Democrats and Republicans to replace the existing ones that we do. I think that's probably where the most work. You should certainly still support federal bills and try to get a bill open, like a federal bill submitted to Congress and then the Senate and the president, and have it fail. And then when it fails, use that to have our alternative media tell the constituents to write to their congressmen, to write to their senators and bitch and moan and complain as to why this hasn't been done. I think we should still do that. I'm not saying we shouldn't fight that, but realistically, I think there's too much corruption. There's too many swamp creepers on both Republican and Democrat side in the Senate and in the House right now. I don't think it can be done.
Well, Nate, you know your disappointment in your candidate and you know the president in the last 4 years is shared by a lot of folks on the left when they thought that having someone like President Obama, who had been a cannabis user in his youth,
Right.
you know, who had been progressive on this issue as a candidate at the state level, while was president for 8 years, you know, what we saw was memos. We saw a lack of federal enforcement of cannabis prohibition in some of the legal states, but we still are just, you know, like you said before, we're missing that president willing to take bold action in either party. And the sad part is the Controlled Substances Act does allow for the president to take action. That if any drug were to not fit the schedule, in that opinion, the attorney general and the president could advocate and change for you know, rescheduling, descheduling, and you know, it seems like everyone continuously puts it back on Congress. I mean, we've now had Clinton, Bush, Obama, and now Trump. And so there's 4 presidents, you know, 3 of whom are confirmed cannabis users in their past. And then, you know, as you said before, you thought, you know, with Roger Stone pushing Trump that way, things might have actually changed. But we don't see that. We didn't see it in the appointments of Jeff Sessions. William Barr was, you know, as a former lobbyist for Verizon, I didn't have much hopes of him. You know, I felt like he was an establishment person. So, you know, where do Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, you know, socialists, where do Americans as general, where do they find hope on this key issue of freedom and seeing that the war on drugs has always been a war on American people?
Well, first of all, they need to have hope in God. And we're going to talk about what God thinks about cannabis on this show, hopefully.
We will.
But they need to, I see so many outsider candidates that are trying to run for office as whether a state rep or, you know, a county commissioner or a congressman, and they really don't have any idea how to market their campaign or raise enough money to compete with the establishment, and they think they do. So a lot of people go in and it just never picks up enough legs. So as Americans, we really need to get more involved in raising money, in donating money to outsider pro-weed candidates on both the left and the right, because like you're never going to get a Republican elected in Portland, and even getting a Republican elected in Tampa is difficult. You know, unless you have the right connections, unless you have the right money. Chad Chronister is a Republican. He got elected, but he's also married to Nikki DeBartolo, so he's got the money connections to run a respectable campaign. So that we need to be realistic about that, because I just don't think that they're going to do anything.
Well, I'm just going to jump in here and start talking about the God thing right away. And I think the first thing we need to do is get our mind away from God and get our mind into the science of cannabis.
Right.
Because quite honestly, the science, you can't argue with it. Cannabis is medicine, but there's a lot of Christians that, you know, demonize this drug.
Sure.
You know? And I think that's mostly where the stigmas come from.
Okay.
That, you know.
So first of all,
by the way, just for those people who are keeping score, Carlos is the atheist.
I do not believe in God.
Right. So you're an atheist, and you would say something like that, Carlos, about the science. Okay. Let's not forget that the whole scientist industry with scientists. Okay, those are the nerds that work in the labs and shit. They literally don't have a job or any money if they don't get funding for whatever research agenda they're supposed to push. So many scientists are bought off, just like the Republicans in Congress and Senate.
Who are they bought off by?
Like any industry. If let's say that you're in the the world is getting hotter, so we need to carbon tax everything. Okay, so like those people that need to just carbon tax everything. There's definitely corruption. Now, I'm not an expert in that industry, but I know that just because someone says, "Oh, yep, the science says that," that doesn't necessarily mean that the science really proves that, because you could have 50% of scientists having one agenda and 50% of scientists having the other. Like the whole perfect example would be hydroxychloroquine. I have a friend who was in the hospital that almost died. Okay. And then he saw on the TV that Trump was saying that there are some studies that hydroxychloroquine would work. Now, hydroxychloroquine is a drug that the patent's already expired. So you had the whole establishment pharmacist saying how ridiculous it was. My friend was yelling at the doctor, telling him to give him a hydroxychloroquine. He literally had already made a video saying goodbye to his 4-year-old son because he thought he was going to die. And he says that it definitely saved his life. And we know the whole scientific agenda, all the scientists in the establishment MD, corrupt population control doctor world, we're all against that. So that's why I say,
well, Nate, you're a Trump supporter, so you would say something like scientific agenda.
right.
Because the truth is that science doesn't have an agenda. People have agendas.
Right. So like,
and we get these agendas from, our belief systems.
So let's talk about the Bible.
So if we have, well, hold on 1 second. Let's talk about how Christianity's set up. There's this whole master-student thing, You learn about Christianity from your pastor, right? Yeah. So you learn from the people that, that know more than you, right? And when these people have these stigmas towards cannabis already ingrained into them, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a stigma against cannabis. It doesn't matter if they like cannabis. They're going to preach that God wanted it this way.
Okay.
Right.
So let's do this. Let's forget about what religious people say about cannabis for a second. I'm going to address that, and let's just first of all talk about what the Bible actually says. So if you have a Bible, I have a Bible right here. Okay, and you open it up to page 1.
Now, is that in ancient Aramaic or is that in English?
Yeah, I'm not even. I don't even need to open it because I have this verse memorized. And
okay, translations do make a difference.
Right. No, it's true.
King James was a.
It's true. Listen, Gary. You're going to love what I'm about to say. I'm going to make your whole point. Okay. Because this is part of the Torah, which is your Bible. Okay.
By the way, Lilith smoked weed, just so you know.
Right. Right. So in Genesis 1 verses 29, when God's creating everything, God says, "I have created all herbs and seeds." It doesn't say, "I've given you all herbs and seeds except for cannabis." And for the Christians listening to this right now, you're not. If you dropped off Jesus in the Garden of Eden, let's just say, for example, okay, I find it very highly unlikely that he's going to say, "Okay, guys, listen, my dad, your heavenly Father, who made all this shit, okay, and is all knowing and knows everything, didn't realize you guys were going to figure out how to smoke this shit. So as a direct result, we have to ban it, outlaw it, and we have to lock up people for using it, and we have to lock up more black people than white people." Okay, that just doesn't seem like something that Jesus would do. Remember, whose idea was it to make weed legal? Was it God's idea or was it man's idea?
But that's the thing. I agree with you, and and I believe that I thoroughly believe there was a guy named Jesus claiming to have superpowers, right? But he used cannabis, right, to heal sick people,
right.
I totally believe that. But, and whether or not you want to believe this guy has superpowers, that's fine, right? Or is the son of God or whatever it is. But I also believe that most pastors are using this as a reason. And it goes back to Trump. Like, Trump at this point is a religion, right? He's an offset of Christianity at this point, I think. And it just goes to show that you can do anything with religion. You can do anything with this concept of God, right? You can say all the plants, God made all the plants bearing seed and fruit, or you can say God made all the plants bearing seed and fruit, except for weed. The devil probably made weed later,
Right.
Like, you can take religion, you can take Christianity, you can take it to wherever you want it to go, right? So if the pastor,
but it's important as people, as Christians, right, that actually study apologetics, look into what the Bible actually says. Like, the English version of the Bible is not it. I hate to say it's not the perfect word of God. I don't care where
you go.
Yeah, I think that's what Gary was getting on.
Okay, so like in Exodus, we're still in Old Testament. So for those pastors and Christians listening to this, they're like, well, what would Jesus really do about weed? Okay, it's like, okay, so we get Genesis 1:29. I get that makes sense. But does that mean that we should just get high all day? So let's look at Exodus 30:23. This is still in the Torah. So this is still in Gary's Bible. There's a verse referring to cannabism, spelled Keneh space BOSOM, cannabism, referring to the holy anointing oil that the Jews used during worship. A lot of theologians and apologetics experts, religious history experts think that that is the same thing. But that's when you only get the translation from the original Hebrew. You know, when they translate it from Hebrew to what the current King James version has now. So like the King James version that's published now versus the King James version that was published in the 1600s by King James isn't even the same thing. So this whole King James version only thing is just a total crock of shit. It's just not
a Living Bible situation.
Right. So if you buy a King James version off the shelf right now at a Bible bookstore, you think the word cannibalism is in there? No, it's not there. So now we're changing our scripture. Now, like right there, I just poked a hole in this whole, oh my God, this is the perfect word of God. This is what's it. Christianity, we got our own problems. That doesn't mean we dismiss it. We throw the baby out with the bathwater. Oh, because he was wrong, then God must not be real. Okay, like Carlos does. We wouldn't do that. But it is fair to have some honest discussions about how we are interpreting the scripture. There's maybe some Christians right now that are like, oh, well, that's all Old Testament law. We're under the new covenant, so that doesn't mean we can smoke weed all the time. Well, let's see. What did Jesus actually say? In Matthew 7, Jesus warns of false prophets, saying, you shall know them by their fruit. Well, what is a false prophet? I define a false prophet as someone that is knowingly deceiving people. So for the first 300 years of the church after Jesus, there was no Christians saying, oh my God, smoking weed is the devil. After 325 AD, when Constantine, who was a pagan, there's a lot of pagan rituals in Christianity, by the way, you don't know about that. Steeple on a church, pagan ritual. Christmas tree, pagan ritual. Lots of paganism because you had...
Familiar with the paganism in Christianity.
You don't look, Druid.
you had Constantine who ruled Rome, and he's basically like, well, Christianity is not going away anytime soon. There's all these Christians getting slaughtered in gladiator rings. So I might as well use it to control people. So he called for the Council of Nicaea. St. Nicholas was there, Santa Claus. It was St. Nicholas was an apostle of God. It was said that he would raise people from the dead. If you look at his Wikipedia, that's what it says.
But funny fact about old St. Nick, Nate, he actually walked over to Arian at the Council of Nicaea and bitch slapped him when Arian denied Jesus' divinity.
Arian didn't deny Jesus' divinity. Arian just said that Jesus had a beginning and God didn't. 10 years after that, Arian shit himself in public and then just died, and everyone's all like, oh, it's because God struck him down. It might have been the religious people that actually poisoned him. Okay, so let's remember that.
Nate, can we pause there for a second?
Sure.
When you talk about, you just said something profound about religious people, not necessarily wanting, certain things to be discussed. Do you believe, or do you understand the current prohibition and taboo around cannabis to be a product of American conservatism, or a product of the fact that the Christian right has bonded with the Republican Party? Like, do we have to take politics and historicity into account here, or is this where's the hang up from people on the right?
I think that what happened was because during all that time and the first 1,000 years, first 1,900 years of Christianity, there were not Christians condemning people who were smoking cannabis. That was nowhere to be found. It all started in the 1920s with the paper industry and a lobbyist named Harry Anslinger. So Harry Anslinger, by a biblical definition, I would define as a false prophet, and here's why. So he represented people in the paper industry. Trees grow from paper. How long does it take to grow a tree? A long time, right?
20 years.
He didn't want to have to compete against the hemp crop, hemp paper. So he started all this propaganda saying that Black men, Spanish men are more likely to rape white women if under the influence of marijuana, through his propaganda, Reefer Madness. So Jesus warns of false prophets. You shall know them by their fruit. Well, because he was able to convince all the people to make weed illegal so they could prosper. And what is the fruit of that? Well, since then, the prison industrial complex, the alcohol industry, the pharmaceutical companies have all jumped on board, buying off all of our politicians and people in the dark about cannabis. That's a huge problem. And at some point, and I don't know where it really got hijacked, you had pastors giving sermons telling their testimony, saying, as soon as I found Jesus, I stopped smoking the weed. I stopped smoking the devil's lettuce. So it became part of their testimony. Okay. You have to remember that Jesus was killed by religious people, the powerful religious Jews, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Well, in a lot of cases, you've had those religious spirits. This is a spiritual conversation. This is about the spiritual aspects of Christianity. You have religious spirits attach themselves to Christian pastors, and that whole spirit's goal is to make God look like a douche. And because of those Christian people is why Carlos is an atheist.
Oh man, I just walked back into this.
Holy shit. 10 minutes, and by the way, that is how Carlos became an atheist.
Right. Carlos is not an atheist because of Jesus. He doesn't have any issue with Jesus. It's these douchebag Christians that have religious spirits in them that don't know their ass from their elbow. They don't understand all of that history I just broke down. So everything I just read in Genesis, in Exodus, in Matthew, the history, what would Jesus do about weed? Would he smoke it? Maybe he would. I don't know. Maybe he didn't. The shroud that they have that covered Jesus' face was actually made out of hemp, FYI. George Washington grew hemp. Thomas Jefferson grew hemp. All the forefathers thought hemp was important for our country's economy.
This is true.
Our scientists can't even really easily be able to get government grants to test it, to find out what it really can do. And with more of those scientific research, okay, that's funded by the cannabis industry, then people like Carlos can say, oh, look what science says, which is what we need. Okay, we need that. So it's really difficult for a scientist to get a grant to test anything cannabis related in the States. The country that is actually the leader on scientific research right now is actually Israel, the Holy Land. So if you tell that to most Christians that were just raised in the Baptist,
it seems like you're trying to take that's the Jews, man.
What?
Like it's not Christians that are studying cannabis right now. It's Jewish people that are studying cannabis.
Yeah, the Jewish people in Israel, but the Christians recognize Israel, whether we believe the way that we recognize Jesus as the Messiah, and they don't unless they're messianic. We like them. We like if the God's chosen people is doing something big in the science world, because all Christians aren't like, oh, I hate science. Like the where that really stemmed from is the fact that some Christians, like I went to Christian school, and they literally told us that the world was only 10,000 years old. So arguably, the Bible dates back somewhere between 6,000 to 12,000 years back to Adam, and then carbon dating, which is science, goes back millions or billions of years old, just a long time. Well, like there was a whole pre-Adamic race around before Adam. We know this from the Emerald tablets that Zechariah Stitchin interpreted. So there's a lot of things about like how old the earth is that Christians don't know. There's a gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, which explains that. So the whole notion that Christians are just anti-science isn't really true. They're just misinterpreting the scripture, is what I believe in a lot of cases.
Well, I've always wondered why plants were actually brought on the fourth day, but on the fifth day you brought on light, which is strange because they separated day from night earlier, but there was no light to so how would they know the day and night was separated? Plus, how the heck did the plants grow without light? Just a thought.
I don't know. You're gonna have to ask God that one when you get to the pearly gates, Gary.
Maybe he figured just one day they don't grow, right?
Hopefully they let you in.
I guess that's good enough. But it depends on what is a day and what is a year. I mean, if you're talking about 10,000 years, you have to guess what did they think a year was, looking backwards. So maybe 10,000 years was 10 million years. You just have to reassign the definition of year.
Well, I mean, like, because there's one verse that says that a day is like 1,000 years to God. So maybe the 7 days was really 7,000 years. I don't know.
Well, the last
we don't have it on YouTube, unfortunately. And if we did have it on YouTube, it'd probably get banned, and we'd have to go to like Telegram or something else.
So, I mean, I've got a few things I want to say about what you were saying. So first off, you spoke about cannabis being, and maybe I'm just blaming everything on religious people. Maybe I'm just blaming everything on Christians. But you talked about cannabis becoming illegal because of racism. But quite honestly, I think this goes again back into Christianity, man. I think racism stems from Christianity. This is something that teaches people, especially here in America, that there's some sort of divine providence, that if you're a white Christian person, right, you're just somehow better than everybody else. Right.
I've been in church my whole life. No one's ever told me that in church ever.
So well, that's because you're an insider. Like seeing it from the outside, dude. Like you really see these things. Like these people feel that there's some, and you know, then maybe I am just blaming everything on Christians or whatever. Right. But I really do see that from a lot of Christian people, and like not to mention, Christianity was used to suppress Black communities for the longest time. Christianity was used to suppress to make slaves obedient. Right.
But just because you have people calling themselves Christians that I believe have religious spirits attached to them, making God look like a douche, doesn't mean that's what it comes down to. Jesus did.
Like, oh,
we're talking about what Jesus did. We're not talking. You can bash and talk about how Christians are douchebags.
Oh yeah, well, they're not really Christians because they don't believe my form of Christianity. You have to understand, all people that believe in Christ are Christians. And that general ideology, that one thing in the center, right, can be taken wherever you want it to go. And it goes back to what I was saying. As long as the pastor hates weed, as long as the pastor hates Black people, that church is going to be racist. That church is going to be against weed. And his followers are going to
like, I mean, I'm just not seeing that. So like, for example, I went to Bible college for 6 months, one semester, under Rodney Howard Brown, the River, Pentecostal church. They are not for weed at all. Okay. They're just not. They just don't get it.
They're closer to the Adventists.
They get
body, purity of soul.
They kind of had to put up with me because I was in their government program. So they're definitely not for weed. They just don't get it there. But they're definitely not racist, because if you look at the congregation of the church, it's very diverse. So I'm just not like, I've gone to Black churches, all Black. I went to a small, predominantly Black church for 12 people. So like this, I mean, I'm sure that there's racist Christians out there. There's racist every type of people out there. But from what you're describing, and then my personal experience of actually being in Christianity, not looking on the outside and then making judgments, but actually being in Christianity, I've just never seen that. I've never seen anyone say anything racist. I can't think of ever. I mean, maybe it's happened, but
well, hold on, Nate. I think this is a key point that you brought up, is that you mentioned about looking at the congregation and then feeling as though, well, there's no racism involved. But I went to Without Walls many times in the, right at the turn of the century in 2000s and such. Right. I was dating a couple girls that attended that congregation, and to see, yes, there are tons of Black faces in Paula White's congregation. But the fact is that it didn't feel as though that community was being served by the administration in many ways of that church.
That's the other thing, is whenever people want to decide to pick on Christianity, they always use the example of the most douchebag prosperity preacher that they can imagine and think of, and that's the norm. I come from like small church, just regular Joe six-pack pastor Christianity. This whole, oh my God, if you're just going to give me money, then an angel's going to show up at your door with a check and give it back to you 10 times, because we're going to hijack the gospel and just turn it into something that Christianity really isn't.
So what are your thoughts on her saying, give me money so these African angels can keep Trump in office?
I don't know what that is.
You don't recall Paula White a few months back said, we got angels from Africa and South America coming to keep Trump in office. And I just,
I have, so like Paula White, she seems, I like her. Ever since she divorced from what's his face?
Randy.
I've liked her a little bit more. But like I went to her church one time and she just breaks this pot and it shatters and everyone's like, everyone get a piece. And then donate $40, and then this is going to happen. And I just kind of like looked at that, and I'm just like, I don't really like that. So you guys, I mean, I agree with you. I'm not that, like, you got to remember, the first 300 years of the church was the people. It was in the marketplace. It was house churches, okay? The first separate building church didn't show up till 306 AD. Then you had whatever Constantine did. We're probably missing books in the Bible. There's probably shit hidden in that Vatican that we're not even being told about our religion. And you start bringing this shit up in front of a pastor, they get really uncomfortable.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that about the Vatican's role in suppressing key, religious documents, because in 1945 in Upper Egypt, there were several preserved Christian documents, which are now known as the Nag Hammadi Library. And there were many documents from the Gnostics, which had a more they were heavily influenced by the mysticism of the Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism, and they incorporated a lot of ritualistic, what we would define as magic or rituals, into their belief system. And many of these actually have gospels and retellings of Jesus utilizing cannabis as part of the, of course, holy anointing oil that we see described in the Old Testament. So
any mainstream Christian theologian would say that the Nag Hammadi scriptures, which was in 1945, and Nag Hammadi Egypt was when they were discovered, is just false because it doesn't fit their narrative for some reason. I've read all of them, and I just don't understand what their problem is. So one of the Gnostic Gospels is called the Secret Book of John. So what's interesting about John is John was one of the original 12, and all of the other disciples, they were hung upside down and crucified. They were boiled. They were killed. They did not go down in a very pleasant death. It was not fun. They tried to boil John. He literally couldn't, they didn't, and they're like, what do we do with this guy? He keeps preaching the gospel. He's influencing this. He's disrupting our whole flow perfect system. So they exiled him to Patmos, and that's where he wrote Revelation. So sometime between 33 AD, but before 70 AD, in this story, and I'm not saying that this story is true. I don't really have an opinion about it either way. I just think it's interesting. But sometime in this time frame, before the temple was destroyed, John is standing outside on the temple steps, and there's this Pharisee, and he said, "Where's your Messiah?" And he said, "Oh, he's already gone. He's already ascended." And he's like, "Well, everything he told you was a lie, right?" And he's like, "What?" And then I forget what the Pharisee said exactly, but it disrupted John. So John goes out and fasts to the wilderness, and he's asking God, he's asking Jesus, he's like, I saw this guy, I saw him do all these miracles. He died, he came back from the dead, he ascended in heaven, but this Pharisee tells me it's false. What's the problem? So he has an encounter with Jesus, and Jesus tells him this story of this God calling himself Yaldabaoth, and Yaldabaoth says, I am the only God, and there is no other God but me. And it was this story pre-Adam. So if you read that scripture, it has led me to the possible conclusion, I'm not saying this for sure, I don't really know, but it's interesting, that the God of the Old Testament, the Dick God in Leviticus, versus the all-knowing Heavenly Father that Jesus was referring to, may not be the same thing. Possibly.
So Christians at their core seem to be a faith, not knowing which God they're actually worshiping. And God, oftentimes, to Carlos's point, is being utilized by those in the public sector and public square to fit whatever belief system, according to their politics.
Sure. A lot of people look at the Bible as they worship the Bible. It's the word of God. I just look at the Bible as the best thing that we have as an instruction manual on how to have a relationship with God. So I was raised Baptist, in the Baptist denomination, for everyone listening to this, Christianity is essentially this: believe in Jesus and try not to sin, but if you sin, it's okay because it's covered by grace. Okay, good. And that was Christianity. Since going through everything I've gone through my whole life, all this stuff I've accomplished, struggles I've been through, things I've seen, spiritual encounters I've had, there's a scripture in 1 Corinthians 12 where the Apostle Paul talked about 9 different spiritual gifts: prophecy, wisdom, tongues, interpretation of tongues, healings, miracles, and 3 other ones, or faith, and 2 other ones, I forget what they are. And learning how to hear from God for myself, is more I have a relationship with God. So he's the one that brings me all the connections. He's the one, getting direction from him. For example, the day that I interviewed Roger Stone, I did a cannabis interview with Roger Stone that got viewed 970,000 times. Well, the night before that interview, I had 2 very specific dreams about Roger Stone. Now, I already knew that I was going to get I had a press pass to go to an event that he spoke at, but I had 2 dreams. So I was just like determined, I'm going to get this interview. I know God wants me to get this interview. This is going to happen. And then I ended up running into him in the lobby. I had 2 of his books. I asked him to sign them. He was signing them. I got up on how big our social media following was, reporting from my friend Michael, who owns the Canna Chronicle, which a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with. And we went live, and it got viewed 5,000 times instantly. And then we re-edited the video and memeified it and uploaded it the next morning, and it just climbed to 970,000 views. Like, being able to pull off and have opportunities like that, I feel like I have kind of an unfair advantage because God is kind of leading me and telling me where to go. This invisible mystery man in the sky.
So you don't think saying that you have an unfair advantage because you believe in God and he's showing you where to go doesn't mean that you think that you have some sort of superiority over other people?
No, I just think because I'm humble enough to acknowledge that there is a God and that he's God and I'm not, and it's about what he wants for me and not what I want, gives me an unfair advantage. I mean, it's just a fact. I don't think I'm better than anyone, you know?
Because you're humble, you have an advantage because God gave you this advantage.
Correct. Yeah, like I mean, you can compare the story of Jesus.
I'm just going
on it. We compare the life. If we compare the historical story of everything Jesus did to Muhammad, to Buddha, to whoever the Hindus follow, you know, whatever, that's all fine. That's all good. I'm, you know, not hating on those guys. I'm just saying that my God just kicks everyone else's ass. Jesus is just way better.
I'm just interested in the fact that you seem to feel that Christianity is polytheist, and that there's all sorts.
I mean, it's possible. It's possible either way. I don't have to know. I don't have to know that. Maybe there's a version of several little gods and are one all-knowing God, and we're all connected. I don't know. I don't need to know that. I don't need to know that. I just know that historically Jesus is the Messiah. I believe that with all my heart, and he's going to lead me to fulfill my purpose and get everything that God has for me. And if I don't have him, I just don't think I'm going to be able to pull it off. I don't think I'm that smart, honestly. I'm not superior. Okay.
You're familiar with the parable of the elephant, where you had 5 blind men looking at an elephant, and each one felt a different part and thought that the elephant was totally something different. One thought it was a rope, one thought it was a wall, et cetera, et cetera. I see God as kind of the same way. I mean, the largest organism in the world is this giant fungus. It actually is like 5 miles long and 3 miles wide and 2 miles deep. It lives under the ground. And when it comes up in different ways. It comes woody, it comes grassy. I think that's kind of like the way that God is. We all look at it in different ways, but it's all the same. I mean, even though you may have Hindus who have 20 gods, these are all various aspects of the same being. Do you see it that way?
Possibly, but using discernment, and there could be someone worshiping a god that could actually be a demon in disguise. I don't know. The belief that Christians are just like, oh, we're right and everyone else is wrong. So if you don't say the Jesus prayer one time right before you die, then you're going to hell forever. Okay. I think that it's probably a little bit more to it than that. I think that what God is actually looking at is your heart. What are your intentions with all the information that you have and the information you know? You know, I wonder, like the people that grew up in North Korea that literally think that Kim Jong-un is God and have never heard the gospel. Does God just send all those people to hell? No, I don't think so. I think that whatever the system is and whatever gets you into heaven and whatever gets you into hell is, I don't know. It's not for me to decide who gets in and who doesn't. But because of not just historical and religious writings about heaven and hell, but also the number of people in the world that have had near-death experiences that have either gone to heaven or gone to hell, makes me, I don't really question the fact that it's there.
That's DMT.
Right, DMT, right. I mean, there's a lot of people that never took DMT and had a near-death experience and went to heaven or hell.
Your brain makes DMT when you die.
21 grams of it.
21 grams.
21 grams. Okay.
Down to the
right. I'll tell that in my next Christian meeting with my fellow Christian theologians. I'll be like, okay, guys, I figured it out. My father told me it's DMT. Ha!
One of the great things about the Bible, about all liturgy as far as religion is concerned, is it's all up for interpretation.
Sure.
For instance,
Yeah, I don't like. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I have it all figured out. I know I don't have it all figured out.
But you answer these important questions.
Yeah.
See, like I don't believe in God because I don't know I don't have it figured out. You understand?
So are you really more agnostic than atheist?
No, I'm a practical person. I think it's more likely that we don't have a magic person in the sky that sent his son to die for us because he loves us. You know, I don't think that's a practical thing to believe in.
But just about forget about the Christianity argument, just the intelligent design, the fact that we're sitting here talking intelligently with a brain and an eyes and a body that works. It seems like it would just make sense that an intelligent designer made all that. We're not just some random explosion.
We're not going to get into
Why not? It's good though.
Evolution and whatnot, because actually it's more likely that evolution did all that. And I think proven that it did, but
there's no physical evidence to evolution. Like when I was raised, my friends that went to public school were told that we came from monkeys. There's not any physical evidence of us mutating from monkeys to humans.
Of evolution. That's not what evolution says.
You don't believe in the kind of evolution that says we come from monkeys, is what you're saying?
I believe that we're cousins of monkeys, that we're primates, that we came from the same being, or whatever that is.
And if we came from monkeys, would there still be no monkeys on the earth, only humans?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well,
Nathan, that's definitely good one. That's definitely what I'm going to ask God when I get there.
Nathan, I asked him last week. No, I'm serious.
Nate, you did touch on something interesting earlier, just briefly. You mentioned about Zechariah Sitchin and his translation of Sumerian cuneiform tablets. Mm-hmm. In those tablets, it does say that the Anunnaki, the Sumerian sky gods, came to heaven and engineered human beings from the existing primates on the planet as a slave race to mine their gold, which is why we find gold mines in Zimbabwe that are 200,000 years old, even though modern humans only date back to 200,000 years, on the evolutionary chart.
Is that where the Rothschilds lizard people come in and they took all the gold?
I can't keep up with the latest David Icke or QAnon conspiracy. But the point of it all is, and I think that's what Carlos is getting back to, is that our belief system as humans in many ways are built on absurdities that people in certain regions take as fact. I mean, some of the comments we're getting in here that depending on what region of the earth you're born in, you like you said before, if you're born in North Korea, your president is a living god. Up until 1945, until the U.S. dropped an atom bomb on Japan, their emperor was a living god, and that was part of the unconditional surrender, is that he had to renounce his divinity. So I think that there definitely is a disconnect between human beings' spirituality and human beings' theology in many ways. And sometimes we as spiritual people can get the two mixed up, in that we'll hold on to something that's theological and not necessarily spiritual. And other times people are holding on to the spiritual and it goes against the establishment ingrained theology. And so, that's where we get heretics. Jesus was essentially crucified as a heretic. But now, his followers represent the largest religious sect on the planet. It's just interesting, all in all, that the one thing that I can see in all of this that brings us together is a plant that we can spark up and pass around to one another, and we can debate these things. But the fact is that type of public bringing together, that type of discourse, is something that the existing establishment powers, whether they're on the right side or the left side in this country, do not want. They don't want people like us all getting together and thinking critically and waking up and realizing, hey, we're being screwed by regardless of who's in power. And that's the part that makes cannabis so dangerous.
And that kind of like the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about is just that is there is an attack, whether you like Trump or hate him. Some people love his tweets. I love him, but some people hate his tweets. I get it. And they think this is going to incite violence. He gets up there, tells everyone to go home, and the tweet's taken down, and everyone blames Trump for the riot. So I don't know. I don't know if I buy that. So before it was all like conservative channels being taken down. So, for example, I have 2 Facebook pages. I've got facebook.com/make media great again, which is a conservative news publication. We got over 1 million views, and now when I post on it, it doesn't do anything. It does like no engagement. Christians for Cannabis. You guys can, if you search Christians on Facebook, I had a page that you used to be able to search Christians for Cannabis, and it's got 23,000 something like that likes on the page. Just me talking about what we're talking about today, about answering the question, what would Jesus do about weed? But you can't even find that now because big tech censored it. So you have to search facebook.com/wwjdweed, or if you just search wwjdweed in the bar, you'll find it. But so I already know what censorship is like, and I've been there for a few years. And now that big tech, Twitter and Facebook, they take down the president's account, they take down his YouTube account, and then the App Store, the Apple App Store and the Google App Store take Parler, which is basically just a Twitter for conservatives that's more clunky and shittier, but it's free speech. They take them out of the App Store, and then Amazon, their hosting, takes away their hosting and basically erases them completely. Whether you're a liberal or a conservative, a Democrat or a Republican, a Trump supporter or an Obama supporter or a Biden voter, that should scare you. That is not good. But because it's happened, that's a genie that they're never going to be able to stick back in the bottle. So I think that there's a huge opportunity right now in big tech. I think that Elon Musk, if he is a patriot, I mean, Elon Musk is so worried about Christianity and Islam that he literally wants to take us to Mars because he's afraid that we're never going to get along. So he just wants to save us by taking us to Mars. So that tells you his intentions are probably good. So if he created a Tesla phone, I would switch from Apple in a heartbeat. That was in the Tesla App Store. That was like open source. And then with all this cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and blockchain technology to make it so that the establishment literally can't take you down through crony capitalism. You know, I wouldn't host a website. I wouldn't start a conservative news site or a Christians for Cannabis news site right now and have it hosted on Amazon. It's freaking crazy. It's just going to get taken down. So I think that because of that, I think that everyone, as Americans, people that care about free speech, we need to start migrating our lives off of Google, not being reliant on Google, not being reliant on Apple, not being reliant on Facebook, not being reliant on Twitter, not buying our shit on Amazon. It just puts a bunch of local businesses out of business anyways. It's not even really good for the economy. It's like big tech, like we all knew about before Trump, everyone knew that the prison industrial complex existed, that the military industrial complex existed, that the big pharma, pharmaceutical company industry existed, and that they were pretty evil. Not having the woke people knew that they didn't really have our best interests at heart after Trump. Okay. And this is one thing that he'll go down as president is doing. He woke up a lot of people with that because everyone's now aware of the big tech Silicon Valley industrial complex. So I think it's very, very important that we start having ways to not be reliant and dependent on just them, because like channels like this, Facebook doesn't like, Twitter doesn't like, Google doesn't like, YouTube doesn't like, Apple doesn't like. They're never going to be like, it's never going to be a featured post. They're like, we have, Suncoast Normal featuring Chris Cano and Carlos. They're never going to like you guys ever. They're going to hate you because of what you stand for. And that's against the establishment. That's against the pharmaceutical companies. That's for full legalization, which means more people get healed and they don't make as much money off of healthcare because the healthcare system is just completely corrupt. And like the sadists that enter in our healthcare system, the population control doctors, those people just need to be rounded up and arrested, honestly.
Let's not forget also that Twitter and Facebook are not public entities. They're private entities owned by corporations.
And if that's the case, then that's exactly why we need. Then they're getting a lot of money. If they get a lot of government funding and shit like that, so they shouldn't be able to get that. And then they,
I agree with that.
If they're really going to say that and say, well, yeah, we're a private entity, so we can censor anyone we want because of Section 230. because there's liability, we'll get in trouble. That needs to be changed, so they're not going to have that excuse anymore. But if fine, it's a free market, then there needs to be the next Facebook, the next Twitter. We can't have this. We can't live in a country where the political race, one political candidate people don't like what he's saying, and right before the erase, the social media giants have the power to just take him down. There needs to be other way he can communicate. That's why apps like Telegram are getting real popular right now. I just got on Telegram. It is badass. Rumble is like a clunkier YouTube that maybe has some future. DLive is similar to YouTube.
It's probably a better idea to, when you go and you post to somebody else's website, right, they say what you can do on that website. Amazon, right? If Amazon tries to post something to Suncoast Normal's website, you better believe I'm going to censor that shit. No, the point is that we post whatever we want to our Suncoast Normal website. That's what we have the right to do. That's how we have the free speech, right? We're sending this podcast right through, and Jesus Christ, my dog just died. No, we're posting whatever we want to our website, but if we, want to utilize these tools that these other companies have put out for us, right, then we have to play by their rules. I mean, I think that's
right. And if one of them has rules, and if one of them has rules,
it's not Twitter's job to foster free speech.
Right, but if one of them is going to have rules like Twitter and Facebook, that's going to say, okay, we're going to censor you because you're a conservative, it's obvious at this point that the conservatives are getting taken down more than the left. But sometimes the left does get taken down for whatever reason. My Christians for Cannabis
against establishment, pick one.
My Christians for Cannabis Twitter account, Media Mogul Twitter account, and personal Twitter account all got taken down, and I didn't even do anything.
We're not conservative. We like fucking weed. That's why we're censored.
Okay, but here's a hypothetical.
Both the weed and the conservative, the two different groups, are both censored. So if they're going to say that we're going to censor you, and then there's another social media app that says you can say whatever you want here. We believe in the Constitution. We support free speech as long as you're not a pedophile. Then fine. The free market tells me that I'm going to go there. And like if Trump announces that he's going to start a news TV station or merge with OAN or start his own social media app overnight, that's $1 billion company right there.
Yeah. But let's be clear about something, because it seems like in modern America we have such a gap missing of remembering the 90s. Trump was synonymous with failed brands in the 90s, and it is only in his recent time trying to set himself up to run for president that he's been able to essentially kind of overcome those challenges. But I remember, it was laughable in the 90s to hear anything with Trump's name attached to it. Like, oh, you're going to get screwed out of that deal if you've not read The Art of the Deal. The Art of the Deal is about how you can use your privilege to screw over the people, to screw over the government for millions of dollars. And I just find it ironic that an entire generation of people who grew up playing Call of Duty or World of Warcraft and telling other people, kill yourself or go screw your mom, all of a sudden now have an issue. And it's like, how many times have you clicked that terms of service? How many times have you clicked that I accept without reading it, knowing that in there it says you can't tell people to go kill yourself, or you can't plot on the overthrow of the government, which is also interesting because Facebook didn't have any problem in 2010 when they were plotting to overthrow. Chris, real quick. When people were plotting to overthrow Middle Eastern countries throughout the entire MENA region, Facebook actually encouraged it. Facebook groups is the reason, and that's probably the reason we see the change in groups, is why Egypt had a revolution. So, it is, to your point, Nate, big tech in itself is hypocritical, but at the same time, the same people complaining about it, it's like we all plugged ourselves into the matrix. We all put all our data on there, and those people who stormed the Capitol didn't disable their location services, and now people are reaping the consequences of it. And so I just want to make sure that we're pointing out that there's hypocrisy on all sides here.
I mean, that's true. We all did that. We're flawed men. We're not like perfect people, but because of everything that's happened, everyone, just in the past 2 weeks, is awake to the fact that, okay, these big tech establishment companies are not really our friend. Okay, then everyone's thinking that now. Okay, I feel like before Trump, there's probably about 10 to 20% of people that are awake to the fact that there is a group of rich, powerful people that are just trying to wipe us out slowly. And I think that after Trump, it's probably 40 to 60%. So I think that's good.
You did say flawed people, right? I thought you said flogged for a second there. I thought maybe who's beating us up.
But like, I never advocated for the overthrow of the government. I never was telling people to go kill themselves or anything like that. And I've still been censored on Facebook and all my Twitter, all my personal logo, my Christians for Cannabis, all got deleted.
Carlos jokingly called a friend of his a white devil and got banned for 30 days on Facebook.
Right? Yeah, he told me. That's ridiculous.
I'd like to throw out a hypothetical for us, just a moment. Obviously, we are not living. We're living in an age of social media and 24/7 news cycles that make things so different than they were in the 1930s and 40s. What had happened? What would have happened if somebody fact-checked the Hearst newspapers and fact-checked all the things that Harry Anslinger was saying, and there was social media that would have said there is debate as to whether or not Mr. Anslinger's comments are actually true?
But the people fact checking would not be fact checking that based on what they're fact checking now.
Well,
like the fact check. I see fact check. I'm like, that's wrong. That's not right. I see that happen all the time.
There were so many people who knew the things that Harry Anslinger was saying was wrong, but they didn't have a platform to distribute that in particular.
Right, and that's why social media is good. Like the reason why so many people are awake is because we have the internet and we can all talk to each other, and it's just not like media's NBC, ABC, whatever on the TV, whatever on the radio, in that whole establishment. But I mean, Joe Sixpack could never go build a following of 200,000 people or 1 million people or whatever. Now he can. So because of that is why there's so many people that even know the Harry Anslinger story.
I mean, Nazi Germany was all about propaganda, all about the fact that the government had made the decision as to what the message was going to be and put it out there, and everybody had to believe it. That was
why they were burning the books and shit. Yeah, I know.
Everything from the very beginning. So when he who controls the message controls the media, controls the world. That's what it comes down to every once in a while. I can honestly say, of all the things, I post a lot of stuff on my Facebook page, other places. I have never been blocked or put in Facebook jail. And I have to ask people, why do you think that is?
Because Gary doesn't tell people to go kill themselves. Gary doesn't tell people,
I don't say that.
Expletives. I
don't say that.
You've never called somebody a white devil, Gary?
No, I have not. I can tell you, I have gotten some trolls that have flocked to my page.
I bet Gary gets one of his accounts taken down or censored this year. I'll bet $100 right now this year.
I'll take
$100 back on the show.
I'll take you up on that bet, Nate. I bet you. I'll take you up on that.
Like Gary gets one of his accounts gets deleted, and it'll be the reason they'll give is something stupid. Like my Twitter account, they said that I used a robot to build my followers, and that's why they're deleting me. I never used a robot to build my followers. That's not even true. They deleted all my accounts.
Down for that, actually, but we did use a robot.
Right. Okay,
retail business at the turn of the century, as you call it.
Yeah, that's why Twitter got banned.
I would pay for a Google word. We have somebody over in East Asia.
Google's slogan is "Do no evil." Google's slogan is "Do no evil." They're not really doing very good at that, I feel like.
And Apple's is think differently.
Right.
Meanwhile, all these companies won't let their employees unionize. So there's definitely something to be said about power in the people in big tech.
Okay, so let me tell you this. This is a medical story. So I've got this back condition, right? And I got a platelet plasma injection. PRP is like when they take your blood out, they spin it with something, inject it back in. It's like
platelet-rich plasma, PRP.
Right, platelet-rich plasma. So I've gotten 3 injections. Okay, the first one didn't do anything, but the second 2 made a big difference because I found a different doctor. Okay. Not only does insurance not cover that, which insurance doesn't cover anything that actually works, it's a total scam, but Google does not let those platelet plasma stem cell doctors advertise. That's bullshit. So that means that there's actually therapy for someone who's living in pain like I am all the time, but I didn't even know about this. This was even available until about 1.5 years ago because there was no information about it on the internet. So I could have been living in less pain way sooner if it weren't for Google.
Well, in part, it had a lot to do with what people were saying about what these people were doing in regards to putting out endosomes and putting out stem cells and things of that sort, because they're worried about the origin of the stem cells as to where exactly they came from. Did they come from a
There's
cell
definitely-
line that was started in the
definitely-
1970s with an aborted child, etc.?
there's definitely doctors that are better than others, and there's some quacks in that industry, but that's just not an excuse for Google to just censor the whole industry.
No, but they have the right to, because they are private industry. Just like when you walk into a bagel shop and it says no mask, no shirt, no shoes.
Like when you, Gary, when you've got someone like me that's living in pain, okay, that has no, there's no like options for someone that lives in as much pain as I do. Zero options, okay. And this is something I could have gotten a few years ago, but because Google just deciding that it's not proven science, even though they're not scientists, when they're supposed to be like appealing to everyone, I just don't like that. I think that like that's gonna leave room for companies like DuckDuckGo to come and compete, and other companies and like alternative news media companies and stuff like that. They're not mainstream, because that's the only way you can get the real shit. Like I don't even have insurance. Why don't I have insurance? Because insurance is a complete scam. You have to it has to be in your network of all these doctors that were brainwashed by the medical establishment, that think they know everything, that just want to like cut me open and stick screws in me. That's not happening. Absolutely not. Like the healthcare system is so corrupt and so full of so many sadist and sick people that I don't know what's going to have to happen for it to be reformed. But the way it is now is now. This is not it. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but it's just not. That's just not. No.
Well, I find it interesting in that, you know, you're saying that this particular treatment that works for you is banned by Google and they can't use it. You know, in many ways, cannabis is banned from advertising on Facebook. I mean,
I disagree with that too, but that's because we still need it federal. When it passes federally, that'll be easier. But that's right.
But here's the thing, will it be? Because I firmly feel as though the Nancy Reagan culture has been so ingrained in society that it you know, there are, as you said before, there are doctors out there who are anti-cannabis without looking at the science. There, you know, it's not like our medical schools teach how you can utilize the endocannabinoid system to heal other parts of the immune system. So, you know, you're absolutely right in the sense that there are facts and there are stories out there and there are anecdotes and there are experiences that are suppressed.
So in our culture, though, like in Florida, for example, because we got the medical card, I know a lot of people that 5 years ago would have said, like, especially like from the boomer generation, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they would have been like, weed is awful. Every person I know is a stoner, just lazy and doesn't do anything with their life. But now that there's all these medical cards, almost everyone has a friend that was in chronic pain or something. And like cannabis has just been a game changer for their life. So now that they know that, it doesn't matter what programming Google has or what they all say. They know that it's not true because they have a friend, you know, they have a friend that it helped. That trumps everything. The more of that happens, the harder it is for big tech and the establishment to suppress everything we know about cannabis. And then, but I don't think that there's going to be any massive or big change until there's some kind of federal program that's not like overtaxed. We need like medical, we need full rec, and we need home grow.
Well, it all depends on who's in charge and who has the power and who has the stories behind them. People don't often remember the fact that the reason we have a program in the state of Florida is partly because of Matt Gaetz, who has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way for the last couple of years in his sycophantic beliefs in the president, but also his father, who happened to have at one point in time bought cannabis for a pastor friend of his who was dying, and who we felt was the compassionate way to help this man do transition with a certain quality of life. So if it weren't for president of the Senate Gaetz and his son working on this, and because of the fact that Gaetz had that story of that pastor in his youth who he gave cannabis to help him out, was the fact that we actually have it now, because people have these stories behind them. The question is whether they want to actually talk about it, because they're worried about what's going to happen to them if they do make that kind of thing public.
So in 4 or 8 or 12 years, If Don Jr. runs for president, you think he would legalize weed? I think he probably would.
It depends if he's gotten that pardon.
Well, Gary, I would just want to point out, Don Gates can go and buy cannabis for his pastor friend and with no consequences. But if I do it for my father, I had the entire justice system throwing the book at me. The state attorney wanted to give me 5 years. In all, luckily through, running up credit card bills, attorneys do take Visa. There was an opportunity to be able to get rehab for that. And then even then, understanding the rehabilitation industrial complex and how you see the vast majority of people who have to go to rehab for cannabis are court ordered. 80% are court ordered. So it's not like, the 4 out of 5 people who have to go to rehab for cannabis. It's not like they're saying, oh my God, I have this weed problem. I need to kick it. I need some help. No, it's literally the prison industrial complex being connected to a nonprofit rehabilitation industry that is raking in millions upon millions of dollars, fleecing the working class. Because again, when it came down to it, none of the people in my family who needed help, we weren't given a free pass when it came to it. But yeah, Don Gates can do that. And it's looked at as some type of anecdotal heroism.
And speaking of the rehab industry, one of their
it is good. It is good that the establishment gets on the green team, though, Chris. I mean, I get what you're saying. If it's not fair, he can do it. I can't. I understand that. But like, if everyone in the establishment was on the green team for real and wasn't sold out, that would be better.
But we got the establishment on the green team. To Gary's point previously in another episode, John Boehner is now a lobbyist for Canadian, pharmaceuticals. Gary, if you want to talk more on, the green team going establishment.
Yeah, I mean, again, it all depends who has the money. And I think that an event happened this last week, which may change everything too, which people haven't even talked about. And that is that Sheldon Adelson was called up to meet his maker. And so he's no longer there financing the anti-cannabis movement and all of the rehab facilities in this country. And also the conservative candidates that were anti-cannabis that he was also funding, even though he was funding a good portion of the research in Israel.
So money and politics, that's the problem, Gary.
But with that particular piece out and with the
COVID, what does the Bible say? It says the love of money is the root of all evil. Isn't that true?
Especially if you are not.
I don't think Carlos could be able to debate that.
Well, that's interesting, Nate, that you say that, because I find it ironic that our conservative, free-loving capitalism Republicans also have this alliance with conservative Christians, and it seems like those two things oftentimes can be antithetical towards each other. It's like, if you're meant to help the sick, help the poor, help the widow, help the orphan, help the immigrant, and those are not the policies that we see coming out of the right side of the aisle. I mean, they're not necessarily the policies we see coming out of the left, but for people who are professing and saying that they live by this moral code, and then that's not the public policies they see. How does one reconcile those two, paradoxes?
I mean, I just think that there's a lot of corrupt people in every pockets of society. I just think that there's bought off Christians, there's bought off Republicans, there's bought off Democrats. Like, I don't think that like right now, if you Republicans versus Democrats, like who's the least bought off, and there's the least crony capitalism in the two parties. I think it'd be a flip of a coin.
I think that would be a fair assessment.
Yeah.
That would definitely be a fair assessment. To your point earlier about scientific corruption, I recall a conversation with my professor, Dr. Jirai said, who's since passed on, in my grad studies in college. And he said, if you really want to make money with a public administration degree, go work for the FDA. And I was like, I don't understand why. Because the same companies that you're regulating and doing studies on will pay you millions of dollars to write white papers on the side, advocating about these great drugs and these great companies. And so we still see that to this day, regardless of what administration, seems to be in power, is that there is major corruption among our regulatory agencies, which is why you see under the current administration, drilling permits in environmentally sensitive lands. And then you see in previous administrations, fast tracking drugs which have to be taken off the shelves within 30 days to 90 days after approval. So for people to have reservations around taking a vaccine that was publicly fast tracked, I could understand why there are reservations. But Gary, you're a public health expert in all this. What are your thoughts on government corruption and how it has created a distrust of scientific policies and scientifically driven public programs?
Well, that's the problem with trust. It's very hard to build and very easy to lose, and that is what our government has done over many, many years. The FDA at one point in time was definitely corrupted by the amount of money they could possibly get from the various pharmaceutical companies and things of that sort. Not so much under David Kessler, but maybe under some of the other folks that were involved in it, and Scott Gottlieb as well. I think that he was ambivalent pretty much about cannabis, and yet he had to deal with the forces that fund him as well, and deal with how things move forward. So we have a situation where we have a number of vaccines right now, which have gone through an immense amount of scrutiny over multiple countries. And one of the reasons it was done so quickly is because of the fact that it actually started 17 years ago when they started working on these for the SARS virus, which is not too far off from the COVID virus. So it's actually a culmination of 17 years of research and not necessarily 6 months. But it was 6 months of bringing it to production with the new genome that fits this particular thing. But we've already proven in many previous trials, we already finished all the animal trials a long time ago, that we had the human trials this last summer. And the only piece we're missing right now is the long-term effect, the longitudinal studies, which usually take several years, that we didn't have time for this time because of the pandemic. But I truly believe that the vaccine that's out right now, it is remarkable. It is not the vaccines of the past. It doesn't have thimerosal. It doesn't have a number of the things that were in previous vaccines that made them toxic. They gave injuries and things of that sort. They've learned from their lessons, which is what you're supposed to do in science. Science is not pure. That is because we have what is called confirmation bias, where people often have the idea in their head as to how the thing's going to turn out before it actually turns out, and so they experiment to make it work to achieve that goal. Kind of like the Eric von Daniken in Chariot of the Gods. He had made this decision that ancient astronauts came over and habitated the Earth 40 million years ago. And you could tell because there's a picture of this old Phoenician script that shows a spaceship going across the sky, when it actually was basically just a stylized version of the sun crossing the sky. And all you have to do is just reinterpret things. And that is the problem with science as well. Sometimes you have to get as pure as possible, and you have to have multiple scrutiny from various other sources. And we've had that with this vaccine.
Gary, are you telling me that Ancient Aliens on the History Channel is not scientifically accurate?
I often thought it was. I mean, I saw E.T. I believed it.
I mean, if you can't,
I was certain that that was true. But looking at von Daniken's and a number of other theorists from that time that came up with theories and then found the facts to go ahead and prove them, that we've lost the trust that is necessary. And we have to rebuild that. So the question is, how do we rebuild that trust?
Chris, if you can't,
our religious leaders as well, because they are perceived authorities.
if you can't trust the History Channel, who can you trust? It's not an arm for propaganda or anything like that. That's just preposterous.
I mean, Nate, I mean, the Learning Channel between 90 Day Fiance and Honey Boo Boo. I mean, I'm learning so much these days.
Remember when MTV used to have music?
Oh my goodness, yes, it wasn't reality shows, right? Yeah. So I remember when Donald Trump was just considered a failed businessman, not a world leader, you know?
And Ronald Reagan was an actor.
Yes, Ronald Reagan was a spokesperson for cigarette companies, not someone who was oppressing civil rights.
Why Donald Trump was elected? It's because he spent 12 years building an audience, a TV audience on The Apprentice.
Yep.
Yes, we were marketed for the last 4 years, and now I guess we got to get back to reality.
Well, going back to the original topic of today's discussion, we've covered a variety of them, but all in all, trust, Gary, in authority, trust in just, in general, is at an all-time low between human beings. And so, Nate, where do we go from here in being able to, I know, you say, well, let's put our trust in God, but how do we build our trust back in each other right now? Because you and I are as far apart politically as Gary and Carlos are, in their belief systems theologically.
I just look at people that I disagree with politically. And I mean, if I'm really honest, what do I think? I think, okay, so Carlos is an atheist and Gary's a lefty, and
am I satanic? Maybe even
all those guys, as deceived as you guys are, as deceived as you are, you really have good intentions for what you believe with what information that you think you have. So I feel like you guys are all good guys. It's like it's your heart intentions, your heart. Like is the people that are, when you're politically divided. I have a pastor friend that's a total lefty, and we play pool, billiards all the time and talk about everything. We're very good friends, but completely disagree politically, because when I'm looking at them, I'm like, oh my God, he's not a Trump supporter. Okay. Or whatever. Or, oh my gosh, he's not a Christian. It's like, well, from the life that they lived, this is what has formed that belief system. And that's true for me too. What I believe is what I've gone through is for my belief system. They still have a good heart with good intentions and good motives. So I think if we all start to really understand that, then it's not going to be as dramatic.
Well, I can see that. I mean, I have a God who tells me to forgive Carlos, and so that's why I do.
We have
that benefit.
We have.
Yeah,
we have paid protest
in his heart to forgive people, so that he has to rely on his heart as opposed to his faith.
Right. But no, I was Carlos. You missed this. I said that quoted a Bible verse that said, "The love of money is the root of all evil." You'd agree with that Bible verse, right?
No,
you don't think the love of money is the root of all evil?
I think illogical behavior is the root of all evil.
I think the love of money pays the bills.
You don't think it's like at the highest level of the corrupt banking system that you have us all enslaved?
You don't really know it is the root of all evil.
You don't think it's the love of money?
You can do a lot of good.
You don't think that people that do corrupt things, you don't think it's money that motivates them? You don't think that?
No, I think it's greed. I think if it was something else, I think it could very easily be something else. I think these people have their own agenda, and they use whatever they can to fucking do whatever they can to fuck everybody over. And I think the main thing that they use is tricking people, right? And one of the best ways to do that is with money. Making poor people think that by voting for Trump, they're going to get money one day. I think that's probably one of the best things.
Talking about seed money.
I'm still waiting on my $600 Trump check.
I think if you donate money to Suncoast Normal, right, a lot of good would come out of that.
This is true, right? Because we put it to work.
I think taking $5 right now and buying a hot dog and going to the guy on the corner over there and giving him the hot dog would do a lot of good for that guy.
That's true. But when a pharmaceutical company,
I don't think money is the root of all evil. I think greed, corruption.
A pharmaceutical company donates millions of dollars to fund all these political campaigns so that people can't get weed, so that they can sell more pharmaceuticals. You don't think that's because of the love of money?
I gotta go, Nate. I'm sorry. This show has gone way too long.
All right, so we wrapping it up?
We're doing our podcast right now.
Carlos, I don't know how to close the show out.
Yeah, well, I think Carlos has a good point in that, there is a lot to be said about people who have money and how they utilize it. I mean, yes, we see a lot of billionaires out there, very philanthropic. They're out there trying to, cure malaria or feed, deal with, homelessness and such. But the fact is that to your point, Nate, about money and evil and such, Carlos treats his employees well. We here at Suncoast Normal put all of the donations and membership dues back into advocacy work. But the difference in all of that is the scales of money. Carlos can become a millionaire as a small business owner, treat people well and do a lot of good, but it's the billionaire class, right? It's that 1%. It is those people who have control of 90% of the wealth in the world, while the other, 99% of us are fighting over the other 10%. And there's a lot to be said about how you can even hoard wealth to impact entire economic systems. We always say, oh, well, trickle down economics, is a problem. Clearly, because there's no trickle down to the working class. People are up in arms about $15 minimum wage. That comes at $31,000 a year. Why are people worried about people making $31,000 a year? Well, the fact is that because we see a system in this country where oftentimes we don't see our tax dollars going to good things. We have a military budget, which is $750 billion, and our closest adversary, China, only spends $60 billion. So here in America, I think, as you said, the public trust has been derailed by the fact that the actions of our politicians don't match up oftentimes with their rhetoric, and it has created entire cults of personality where people are in the streets. Even looking at the comments today, people are saying you're going to hell, or me, Carlos, and Gary are satanic worshiping commies. Just the fact that we have this type of discourse in this country is a major problem. And I think moving forward, how can we have any type of unity and reconciliation first without talks about justice, about where are the injustices in this country, and how do we address them as a collective? So Nate, I'll give you a final word on that. What do you think?
I still think that the love of money is the root of all evil. No, not money. Remember, I didn't say money is the root of all evil. Having money, being a millionaire, that's okay. But loving the money, I still think that's the root of all evil.
I think Adam Bierman is the root of all evil. But
what?
That's the point. He's the guy who ran MedMen, and ran it into the ground. He could have done so much good with that MMTC.
I think that there's good billionaires out there, and I think that there's greedy billionaires that love money. I think
it is. But we do have to wrap this up, though, because this is we've gone way over.
This was fun. This was fun, guys. I hope that,
I'm sorry I ducked out there, Nate. I had to take care.
You got a business to run. I get it.
The show's gone on so long that I got customers walking into the store now. So I had to, while I'm trying to explain why the love of money is not the root of all evil, I had to.
Very good to get some money. I don't think that Carlos loves money at all. I think that he knows that he needs money, which is any business owner would. That's fine. I'm just saying the evils of the world is all driven by the love of money. That's what I believe.
Sometimes I think that the evil of misinterpreting religion oftentimes causes downplay. And
I don't think all those Muslims want to kill all those Jews because they get paid.
Well, actually, the Quran does not talk about violence.
I think it's only 15% of them want to kill us all. It's not all of them. It's only 15%. So it's only like 150 million people.
Okay. Anyways, we do have to end this up. I wanted to at least make one comment in regards to the politics here in Florida. This last week, Senator Gary Farmer put out Senate Bill 662, which is a carbon copy of the Regulate Florida bill to create adult use here in Florida. Will it go far with a $50 excise tax on ounces of cannabis as it comes out of production? I don't think so. But this will open up the discussion and will bring us closer to where we have to go. So we have to keep an eye on that. And we have a number of other bills that we here are sponsoring here at Suncoast Normal that will definitely make things better, like employee protection, patient protection, tourist reciprocity, and of course our home grow bill that we plan on working on to make certain that people have access to that as well. And if you want to become part of that, that's the number right there. That's the place you have to go to sign up and become a subscriber and be part of the change that we are trying to make.
Hey, and if you're watching this podcast live or you're seeing the video on social media, just reminding you guys that we're on, you can listen to us to our audio on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple, and we'll be on Amazon and Google soon, and Pandora,
but not Pornhub.
Not Pornhub. Sorry, Gary.
Or Parler.
Or Parler.
I'll retweet it on Parler if my account gets back up.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you promoting us to all your conservative Christian friends. Thanks, Nate, for being such a good sport.
We'd be on TikTok, but I can't dance. I'm a white guy.
Let's take a moment to praise Nate for a minute. you know,
Give all the glory to Jesus.
people that disagree with us would not want to come on the show and argue with us. So I appreciate you coming on and, you know, talking to us and, you know, saying all the things you did and, you know,
Anytime.
and not getting too pissed off when I say
much
that
love,
there is
Nate.
no
You're
God.
forgiven. No problem.
And thank you for forgiving me. I appreciate that, even though
everyone should, anyone that's listening to this and they've got that one Bible thumper conservative friend that they don't agree with him on weed, you need to take the link to this podcast and you need to send that to them and just say, just listen to what this guy's saying. He's a Christian. That's what I'm here for. A lot of people, I'm in the cannabis community to get the conservatives on the green team because there's not really anyone else that's stepping up to do it right now because they're afraid of, oh, what would people think? Like, oh my gosh, I could never tell my Sunday school teacher what we think about that because we've been told about weed in church. So that's very important to me. So you can find me on facebook.com/WWJDweed. I hang out on Instagram all the time, Nate Jurowitz. If you just look me up on Instagram, you can direct message me. That goes straight to me.
Cool. Jano, Gary, you got anything else you want to say?
I just want to say that this weekend, let us remember, Monday is not just any random holiday, but it's a day to honor and remember the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who would have been 92 as of yesterday. And for all intents and purposes, this nation would not be the country it is today without the sacrifices of him and so many other nameless others who contributed to the civil rights movement. The fact that, Cubans, Jews, and white folks can get together on a podcast and discuss politics is definitely an opportunity that hails to Dr. King's thoughts that we can judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin or religious creed or background.
If you guys want to just make me your Juan Williams, where I'll just be a conservative talking head that comes on, I'll do that.
I've never liked Wanda Williams, but she had
Juan Williams is the left on the Fox News. I'd be like the opposite.
Okay, guys, officially our longest show ever. Everybody listening, everybody on the video, we love you guys.